There's multiple avenues, and that's kind of the challenge that I had when I had to staff up with Mercedes. If I'm going to do land development, I'm going to go get engineers. I generally found that the engineers were not.
Welcome, everybody, to the Big Picture Blueprint. I'm your host, Dan Haberkost. Mason will be on today's show, but he's not on the intro. Today, we have a pretty fun one. We have Ken Mitchell, who's a very seasoned land development expert with over 50 years of experience in real estate in general, home building, land brokerage, surveying, engineering. It runs the gamut of what Ken has done. He's held leadership positions at Mercedes Homes, Ashton Woods, SunCal, and currently leads Mosaic Land Development in Colorado. He's done a lot of business in Texas as well, but this is one you just have to listen to because Ken has so much experience you can't really encapsulate it all in a simple intro. It's a really fun one. He's got some crazy stories over the last 50 years, from plane crashes on his land to anything you can think of. So let's bring him in and talk a bit about land development.
Ken Mitchell, welcome to the Big Picture Blueprint. How are you doing today?
Good morning.
Well, we're very, very excited to have you on the show. Followed you on LinkedIn and gotten to see a lot of the stuff you've worked on throughout your career, and we've done a lot of research on you, but want to give you a little bit of time to just tell people who you are and what you're up to now and kind of the background of how you got started in land and development.
I was actually trained to run national parks. I've got a master's degree in forestry from Colorado State, which is basically where I live now. I returned back to the university town that I really loved when I got here. So I went all the way through 5.5-year program. And at that time, the same thing happened that's happening now with Doge. The federal government said, we got too many people in the Forest Service, the National Park Service, the Bureau of Land Management. Get rid of everybody. Let's just get rid of them. So you can imagine, I'm ready to go. I had done an internship with the Forest Service. There were no jobs, zero, zilch, nada. So I had been working in Texas on the summers doing landscape maintenance on a large master plan development, and I was asked to come down and help out building houses for a year. And the way it was sold to me is, I know you love Colorado, but it's just for a year, Ken. Just come to Texas for a year. And that was about 25 years longer than I expected. But when I came there, I started building houses. And a story too long to tell, I ended up leaving that company, going out to Las Colinas, building patio homes there. Then had a chance to be a land development understudy on a master plan community called Spring Park, which was in 3 cities. It was in Garland, Richardson, and Plano, Texas. I worked for that company for, probably a year and a half, 2 years. I had an older gentleman who had no desire to really do the work anymore, so he let me do everything. And I strongly encourage finding opportunities like that because he just told me what to do, sent me out in the field every day. So I started developing some subdivisions, started doing coordinating water utilities, basically everything that happens in the land development process. That property was going to be acquired by a foreign investment firm that was actually a Ponzi scheme, which I didn't know for about a year. So I worked with them. I was actually in the contract of sale that I would work for them for a year while they were doing due diligence on the master plan community that I was managing. So when that fell apart, then after that, I was asked to come back to that master plan community, but as a consultant for an insurance company that had a major interest. And they said, Ken, we're going to pay you to manage this community, but you can work for whoever else you want to. So we had about 1,200 acres left. So we did what I call slice and dice. We cut it up into about 15 or 20 different tracts. And every time we sold a tract to somebody, I ended up developing it for them or working on entitlements for them or doing something of that nature. So that kind of launched my business. In between, I ended up accidentally brokering some things without having a broker's license, if you know what I'm saying. So I I decided I should get legitimate, got my broker's license in Texas. So then I started doing two things. I started doing fee development. You give me a piece of dirt, I'll give you finished lots. It was a set fee per lot, and I drew basically, a certain percentage of status of completion. That was regular money that allowed me to eat, that allowed me to have a roof over my head. And then I brokered to get the big wins. And Dan, I'm sure I always tell people that want to be land brokers that you need to be prepared to starve for a couple of years, that your wife will need to support you or someone else, or you'll need to have a trust fund because I've got 2 or 3 deals working right now. The horizon is 12 to 18 months. So I'm going to have to work hard on them for 12 to 18 months. They're entitlement deals. So I'm getting the seller a bigger price, but we're taking it all the way through entitlement. And so we're only going to get that big price if we get to the goal line. So I always have worked in my career because I'm distrustful of land. I always have taken a portion of my income has been steady income. And it's the low-hanging fruit. It's X number of dollars per hour. It's X number of dollars per project. And then the brokerage I always relied on for the enhancement income that you could sock away for your retirement or for a vacation or something. So, I don't consider myself to be among the best land guys because I've never made a living full-time selling land because I was too nervous. I grew up poor. And it drove me crazy, to have to wait so long to get paid on every deal. In between that, I started an engineering and surveying company because I could not get fast enough response. I had a lot of things going on and the engineers were not, they weren't jumping when I need for them to jump. So I talked to one of my lead engineers with Graham Engineering. I said, why don't we just start our own engineering company and then you have to show up when I ask you to show up because I owned all the surveying equipment. I owned all the office furniture. I needed a tax deduction. So it accomplished two things. It gave me a tax deduction. Plus I had ownership in the company. So it allowed me to see behind the scenes what engineering and surveying companies really are like. At the same time, I was also doing bid work for a very talented contractor, a friend of mine, who didn't know how to bid work. He didn't know how to read plans. He was great at moving dirt. He was great at taking care of equipment, but he could not read a set of plans to save his life. So he just paid me 5% of the gross to bid plans, to put on nice clothes to go in the office because he didn't have any nice clothes. So again, that helped me learn the excavation business. Really, it gave me a good field knowledge. So I'm ranting and raving a little bit, but what I'm telling you is how I got here. I always call myself the accidental land developer because everything was accidental in a sense that I moved in different directions. But I think also, like a lot of land guys, I have a restless mind and I have a thirst for knowledge. And I usually find that the best land guys have a restless mind and a thirst for knowledge because land presents, if I sell a house and I'm a partner in a company that sells houses, but when we sell a house is pretty well known. The permits are there. The water and sewer tap are there. There's a building envelope. It's been heavily inspected. There's nothing really, I don't want to diminish the residential side of the business, but it's very rare that you're going to find skeletons. It's very rare that you're going to find dinosaur bones when you buy a house. It's very rare that you're going to find a plume of toxic waste under your house. So I think land people have to be incredibly adaptable. They have to be great at doing research because the number of things that go bad on land is terrifying. And Dan, you probably will mirror that. I am actually terrified to buy land. I am the most scared of anything. I always delay closing as long as I can because I want to know everything I can, because no matter how well you do it, there's always things that jump up at you that you unanticipated. So I'm working by myself for a while, my own company. Then I was approached by a home builder, Ashton Woods Homes, that wanted me to do their land acquisition and development and take over kind of a land investment company. And so I worked for Ashton Woods for several years, did the state of Texas. I worked their Texas market for them, primarily Dallas-Fort Worth. Had to keep a pipeline of about 1,000 lots a year, which takes anywhere between 10 to 30 deals, depending on the size of the deal. Had an in-house development arm as well. We had a team put together. And then, again, another story too long to tell. I got really pissed off at the national president. And I got an offer the same week I got pissed off at the national president. I was asked by a headhunter to interview for a job to open up the land development side of Mercedes Homes in Florida, which at that time was about the 47th largest home builder in the United States. They could not get enough lots. They were begging developers for lots. They were buying scattered lots. They needed to produce their own lots so that they could grow. So they gave me an operating line of about $350 million, and I skipped something in between, and I apologize. I used that line to staff up a land division. We had 14 different divisions, a division being a city like Tampa, Orlando. And so we basically built a pipeline to develop lots. And I also monitored the acquisition process when we would buy lots from other people. So now I'm going to roll back for a second. When I was on my own, I had 4 or 5 clients that had loans with Texas Savings and Loans. All those savings and loans went into default on the same day. So I had no business. My business was gone. All the loans were canceled. I went to work for one of the lenders that assembled 12 of those lenders together under what they call the Southwest Plan. And I was made the head of land for that bank, working out bad land deals. And I had about $1 billion worth of assets. So for a couple of years, I worked on resolutions of bad debt for about $1 billion in land and then graduated to other things. So that's why land scares me so much, because I was deep in the files of every single bad land deal that was done by 12 financial institutions that all failed. When you look through the files, it becomes readily apparent why each one of them failed, and it was usually just one thing. It was usually, and I'll give you a good example. Usually you'd see a piece of paper, and it would be a broker's flyer, and the flyer would say, water and sewer available. And when you dig down into it, you find out water is available. It's 6 miles away. Sewer is available. It's 8 miles away, and it's $4 million. And that's why, so the bank got the flyer, they made the loan, and then nobody had the money to finish it. So I digress. So, but it's an important part of my career, because twice in my career, I did loan workouts. I did another $1 billion for Colony Capital in the state of Florida. So I went to work for Mercedes for a couple of years. We started at number 47 in the country. We built the organization up to 17. So we were the 17th largest home builder in the nation. And then things got bad. When they got bad, I started laying off a lot of people. I had to cancel almost every deal we had. And it got to a point where I had to either fire myself or my head land guy. And I got a good job opportunity with SunCal out of California to run Florida. So I took that job. Again, I got into a workout situation. I did a number of different things, but mostly I worked out about $1 million in debt under entirely different circumstances. In the 80s, we primarily went after everybody and sued them and had protracted litigation. In the 2000s, when I had the portfolio, we mostly tried to work with people. We mostly tried to negotiate deals. So it was an entirely different climate. But again, I got to see about 350 busted land deals in Florida. So I was working for this company, and then one day I realized we didn't want to live in Florida. And my wife and I sat down and got a map of the United States and just started figuring out where we wanted to live. So I left that company, came to Colorado, and with the intent, I told my wife, I said, let's just move. I don't care. I think we have enough to retire. I can work at REI. I can be the guy that everybody goes to and says, hey, there's an old guy at REI and he knows all the cool places and he knows the equipment. And so I came here with the intent that I would be the old guy at REI, that would be helping people. Once I got here, somehow I got involved in land development again. I did a couple of large master plan communities here. Then I started working entitlement. I do a lot of general consulting, but I'll tell you, this is, and Dan, you're a lot younger than I am. The most satisfying part of the career, everything I do now, I do for fun. There's a dollar attached to it because nobody wants to work for free, but I get to pick my clients. I get to pick my jobs. It's a crazy diverse set of clients and jobs. And whenever I feel even the slightest bit of stress, I look to go somewhere else. And because it's stress that kills you, it's not having the time to take care of yourself, take care of your body, enjoy life. I have all those things now. So I started out trying to retire a couple of years ago. I had a development company at the time, and I told my partner, you better get ready because next year I'm going to be 10% retired, and then I'm going to be 20%, and then I'm going to be 30%. Well, I never got to much more than 40, 50%. And it's enough for me. I can go on vacations when I want to. I control my time. So that's kind of the end game for me is I work with a wide variety of different clients. I really like working with the more personal relationships with smaller clients rather than big developers. I like the brokerage. I do almost anything you can imagine. You would not believe the weird, strange things that I'm doing right now. And I totally love it. I totally, totally love it. If it's weird and strange and hard and really complicated, I'm in.
Wow. Well, no, thank you for that summary. You've been on all sides of the equation, from building the houses yourself to doing the horizontal work to working out bad loans, owning the engineering and surveying company. That's quite the breadth of experience there. To give our listeners a little more point of reference, was that in the 70s you started, 80s?
I started home building in 1976.
Okay. All right. So you're coming up on 50 years here, and you've been through a lot of different cycles and ups and downs. And there's a lot of different questions I want to get to here, but you alluded to something that I have to pull out. And you said how a lot of these projects can take a long time. They can get delayed. You can go without a payday for a long time. And so you had your brokerage work, you had your consulting work, and that was kind of the day-to-day feed yourself sort of income. What would you say to somebody who's newer, a younger person that's starting out now? How can somebody get into the land and development space, in your opinion, in a way that isn't incredibly stressful, where they're only getting paid every 6 to 12 months? What do you see as the best starting point?
There's multiple avenues, and that's kind of the challenge that I had when I had to staff up with Mercedes. You would say, okay, and if I'm going to do land development, I'm going to go get engineers. I generally found that the engineers were not oftentimes creative enough. They were too linear to really develop really, really interesting communities. They were, and they weren't deal makers. I would say for me, a good place to start would be working for a general contractor, because then you kind of get into the mind. The best experience I ever had was taking a general contractor as a partner in my land development company a few years back. So Tony Vienna, who's I still work with a great deal, he would always explain the other side. So you learn, when you have a problem, you learn that there's a number of different ways to resolve it, a number of different pieces of equipment, a number of different ways. You can either do it fast and expensive or slower and more deliberate at a lower cost. So I think I would get a job that is somehow related to land development in a very related way. And I hate to say this, but my jumping around, I jumped around like crazy. That was the best thing. I think don't get stuck in one place. I always tell everybody, first of all, I've got a young lady working with me now as kind of as a consultant. She helps me with projects. I said, you've got to get your real estate license, because then you can do deals on the side while you're working. You can help friends maybe buy their first house. You've got to get your feet wet somehow, but you have to understand the vocabulary of real estate. So get your license. Don't try and go specifically there. Work on things in areas that are related, maybe not directly, but get the widest breadth of experience. And even if you have to trade salary for experience, I always would vote for experience over salary.
I think that's great advice. And I think a lot of people that listen to the podcast and, kind of in our circles are the small business owners. They're the entrepreneurs that refuse to work for anyone else, and they want to go out and start it themselves. But unfortunately, you made a point that I want to dive into a little bit is everyone talks about land as it's the most safe and secure and best asset class, and it's always going to go up in value. And projects are always going to be amazing, and you can't lose money on land. I've proven that wrong multiple times. I love losing money on land. I'll be grateful for these experiences in 40 years, maybe. But Ken, I want to dive into that. What have you seen in your, or go ahead.
I'm going to put my finger right on what you just said. Okay. If I buy a house and it goes down in value, it's probably not going to go down in value more than 10 or 20%. And I can wait it out and I can rent it out. I can do a lot of things with that house. If I buy a shopping center, I'm still going to get revenue. I'm going to get an income stream. Land is the only thing that just takes your money every single day and gives you no money in return in a down cycle. And when you're not as smart as you think you are, and you're waiting for somebody to buy it from you. So during that time period, all you get to do is pay the taxes and mow it. And so land, particularly the kind of land that we buy near an urban center, the only alternative is to farm it. And what are you going to get? $50 an acre, $100, $200 an acre? It's not going to pay the debt service. I think the opposite way. I think land is by far the most dangerous thing that you can buy. I think it's the greatest way to diminish your net worth created.
So that's fascinating. And I want to have a real conversation about it, because I hear you on the illiquidity component of it. And yeah, market fluctuations of there's the chance. And we buy land from people that bought it as an investment, and we buy it for less than them 20, 30 years later sometimes than they thought it was. But I heard on some other podcast, the best investment strategy is find the city center of a growing town, go 20 miles to the whatever direction and buy all the land you can and hold it for the next 30 years. Do you agree with that and think that's a good speculative investment of a long-term kind of a land bank?
I'm going to give you a good example.
Or do you think it's...
In 1965, my wife's parents bought 10 acres of land in the Antelope Valley in California, which was supposed to be the next best thing. And they paid $15,000 for the land. So between 1965 and last year, how long is that? 55 years. I just sold it for $60,000. So 15 to 16,000 over 50 or 60 years, that's not a good investment. I figured out if I put that same amount of money in the stock market over that period of time, it would have been several $1 million. I mean, just as if you buy it in the wrong place, if the utilities don't come, I mean, it's just, I would rather overpay and be in the middle of a vibrant city with a market, a number of national builders wanting to have a position. I would rather overpay for the corner of First Street and Main than I would go out into the country and hope that the utilities and the roads are going to come to me someday.
Yeah. Yeah, you brought up, I'm glad you brought that up. I had to look up where Antelope Valley is, and that's way out in the desert. Anyone that's been out there, it is hot all the time. And it's interesting. You mentioned a lot of work in Florida. I have seen so many subdivisions in Florida that were done in the 60s and 70s where they were sold to out-of-staters up in New England and the Midwest, come down to beautiful Florida. This is in the Carolinas too, but they weren't properly developed. There was a lot of dishonest marketing. People bought it from a long ways away, and 20, 30, 50 years later, they're selling it maybe what they bought it for, sometimes a lot less. So I've seen a lot of instances of this. And I think what you're hitting on is, location and not being overly speculative. If you're in the middle of a major metro, all right, there's jobs, there's people, there's infrastructure. You have a much higher chance of at least not going down. What would you say beyond that are some of the other major factors that have differentiated people who have done this successfully for decades and all those developers who call them broke?
Well, first of all, I'm going to talk about Ken's rule of threes. I have a rule of threes. So if you're going to build houses, don't start one house, start three. Because you're going to make a lot of money on one house. You're going to lose a little money on one, and you might fight to break even on the other. But if you started and just built the one house that you lost a lot of money on, you might be out of business. So I see a lot of people that have a portfolio, and individually they may have some assets that are terrible in their portfolio, but the winners outdo the losers. So I think that's number one is if you think you're going to buy one piece of property and make your lifetime income, I think that's a ridiculous thought. I think diversity is super, super important. I also think the second thing is, and I'm going to come back to the roaring 80s. I was asked by one of my clients to buy a piece of property. They were going to give me the financing. It was $2-3 million. And they said, "You're so good at this, Ken. Why don't you buy this? We'll give you all the money and you can develop it and you're going to make $500,000. And so I really thought, this is my big chance. And then I sat down and I thought about it. I didn't have enough money in my bank account to pay the interest payments for 6 months. So if the deal got delayed by 6 months, I would be bankrupt. So I always thought, I'm going to live to fight another day. And I've always, my first and last saying has always been, I'm going to get rich slow. And I have practiced that. I have always tried to get rich slow, because getting rich quick, trying to do it on one deal is not a winning strategy. So I would say, and also many of those people that were successful had a partner that had really strong financial backing. And so a lot of the people that I've seen be very successful, they had a person who was already very successful that had a very strong balance sheet, very strong net worth, and they could take the hits. They could roll with the punches. They could take the long view. And if there's a down year or two, they had the money to carry it. And I think that's equally important. If you don't have the funds, you need to have a friend or a partner that does. Ally yourself with someone. You have the experience, they have the money. You want to try and trade places by the time you do a few deals together. You want the money, let them have the experience.
Yeah. Oh, I really want to emphasize 2 points you made. The get rich slow. I love that, because I think a lot of people in an attempt to get rich fast end up never getting there and jumping around from one hot thing to the next hot thing they heard about online. And number two, I love to hear you say that about partnering with people with more financial resources than you, because my older friend that got me into the business, he's been in it since the 70s too. What he always told me was, go and do as many deals as you can, but structure them with investors who have more money, who can hold and just give away as much as you need to protect yourself from any sort of ballooning debt or substantial monthly payment. So it's very much aligned with what you're saying.
So Ken, we all kind of have a little bit of that ADHD personality that makes it hard to do what, Dan's saying of, just stick with it and keep doing the same thing. There's tons of new trends going on in land development right now. There's agri-hoods where they're developing these, agricultural centered communities with, community gardens. There's a lot of green construction and engineering. What's exciting to you right now within the development space?
thing that's the most exciting to me is redefining how we live. Everybody squawks about affordable, attainable housing. I think it's a problem, but I don't think it's as big as a problem as we say. I think the problem is we've created a mindset that you have to have a 5-bedroom house with a 10,000 square foot lot. So I think part of the excitement for me is younger people redefining what it is to own a home, not necessarily feeling like they have to own a home. My stepson, for a period of time, was in 8 or 10 different markets in the United States, working with private equity, opening up companies. I tell people, if you're not going to be someplace for at least 3 to 5 years, don't buy a home. You need to rent, because you're not going to get the money you put out back in. You're not going to get enough appreciation to cover your cost of sales. So I think every single person that is my age was told a couple of things. You have to buy a home right away. You have to buy more home than you can afford. And I think those are the worst advice that our parents ever gave us. I've always lived way under my means, and I survived. There were a few times when it was very, very tight, but I always bought a home under my means. I'm in a home today that's under my means. I'm very happy for it. So I think redefining the amount of room you need, redefining the amount of land that you need, I think that to me is exciting to see that change of view happening, because part of that will solve the affordability. Affordability is not as much of a problem if you figure out that instead of 2,500 square feet, you can have a great lifestyle in 1,700 square feet.
I think that's really fascinating, and I think it's something that I challenge all the viewers to think about is, what are some agreements you've made whenever you were potentially a teenager that you heard from your parents or your grandparents that you have just stuck with you and you've never really reassessed your life and thought about it. I mean, my wife and I did the same thing. We moved out of our home. We kept it as a rental, and we're renting our next house right now in the same area because we wanted to be in a different, community and everything like that within Colorado Springs. And every decision you make in your life doesn't need to be an investment decision either. You can just enjoy your personal life. But I think I want to hear, I want to take it back to the distrust of land a little bit. And I want to hear a horror story, Ken. What was the worst deal you've ever personally been involved in, whether it was something you purchased yourself as an investment or a project that you managed for a large
You probably want me to tell the airplane story. I was developing 139 lots in Grand Prairie, Texas, and I had to get an easement from the gentleman to the south of us. He had 3.6 acres. And as I was negotiating the easement, he said, "Hey, why don't you buy my land?" And I thought, wow, this beautiful land, it's got these beautiful oak trees, and I'm building a road and putting in water and sewer right past his land. So I said, wow, that's a great idea. I went to my client, Mike Mahaffey, who's probably no longer living. I said, Mike, we should buy this. The marginal cost of adding these 8 or 10 lots is nothing. We're already building the road and utilities. He said, no, Ken, I've already got this. This is enough. I don't want to fool with it. And I said, do you mind if I buy it? He said, no, go ahead. You buy it. I don't care. No conflict. So I bought it. A week after I bought it, it was beautiful. My pro forma looked beautiful. Beautiful trees. Everything was, I was like, this is the perfect, I am such a brilliant land guy. This is perfect. Look, and I'm going to do this deal, and then I'm going to make $200,000, and then I'm going to go into $1 million deals. And then the next thing you know, I'm going to be doing whole cities. So the week after closing, I got a call from my partner, and he said, look on Channel 4. I turned on the TV, I looked at Channel 4, and I saw a field with a big ball of fire coming out. I'm like, John, why did you call me to tell me to turn on the TV? And he said, that's our property. A guy in an F-16 jet, there's a naval base in Grand Prairie, Texas, Naval Air. He was having trouble with his jet, and he was going to have to check out because the plane was going to crash. And he looked at my property and he said, oh my God, here's an undeveloped piece of property. I'm not going to kill anybody. So he aimed his jet right for my property right before he punched out, ejected from the plane, and just totally decimated my 3.6 acres. There was not a tree alive on that property when he finished. Okay. And I thought, oh my gosh, what happened? So we tried to get on the property. We were told we could not get on the property. There was a guy with a sidearm that said, you are not going on your property because there's explosive bolts and there's classified equipment in this plane. We couldn't get on the property. Then we tried to settle with the government. We were told that the government has 6 months to make a settlement before you can't sue the federal government for 6 months at the time. So I couldn't get any settlement with them. I settled with them on the very, very, very last day of the 6 months. During that time, the market went south. I had no trees. I got a decent settlement, which I call emergency landing fees. But the deal made about 40 to 50% of what I thought it would. And you know what? It was another 40 years before I did a deal myself. Everything else I did for other people, I was scarred for life. And it's probably the best thing that ever happened to me.
Interesting. Yeah, it's funny. You said your performer looked so good. As the land investor's famous last words. I think we've all had those. And it also illustrates that you didn't do anything wrong on this one. I thought it was going to be that there was something you missed, that things just happen sometimes, which emphasizes the importance of not being endlessly concentrated in one place or one property. Something I've learned as well. Well, Ken, you posted recently on LinkedIn about boomers, a lot of baby boomers transferring their businesses, their assets to the next generation. That's happening right now. That's going to continue happening. The baby boomers own most of the assets and businesses in the country, which makes sense. What advice would you give to us, the millennials, the Gen X, the next couple generations, as we move into these positions of ownership, leadership roles? Just from your experience, anything you would say to them?
Well, Dan, I'm going to give you advice that I'm giving myself. When you sell a piece of dirt, when you sell a commercial property, what's the commission typically? Okay, 6%.
And 3 usually.
What if I told you that I could give you 10% commission on every deal that you do?
Yeah, I mean, that's great.
Okay, but you want me to tell you how to get there?
But yeah.
You want to be a business broker.
Yeah.
Because every business has a piece of land with a building on it. And I'm intrigued by the fact I've been dealing with some business brokers lately for friends. They're terrible. I could so do a better job. So my stepson and I are going to start trying to get into the business brokerage business, because if I carve out the real estate side of that, I can get 10%. And it's more fun and more interesting. Generally, businesses can be brokered where you buy them out of their cash flow. You put a little money in and you buy it over time, and there's still the expertise remaining. So for me, the hot new trend would be somehow all of the young people have to take over the businesses of the older people who are dying to retire, but the younger people don't have enough money to buy those businesses. So you've got, on the one hand, old farts like me, they can't retire because they can't monetize their business, have very successful businesses. On the other hand, you have a lot of young people that are dying to get their start and have their grub stake. If you can bring those two together with creative financing, with creative deal making, to me, that is going to be the big challenge of the next 10 or 20 years, is how do those people get to retire, and how do the young people get great opportunities out of that? Because there's a lot of great employees in those companies that really should take over, but they don't have the money. Instead, private equity is jumping in, and all they're going to do is drive up the price of everything.
That's a great area to be in. And I think, something that Dan and I have both discovered over the years is that a lot of the businesses that we've created or services we've begun offering have come from pain points within our own business. That's why I became a land broker this year, is because I got tired of really crappy land agents selling all my property. And it's kind of the same thing on the business broker side of it. But, I don't think I would be able to be as good of a land agent as I am if I hadn't done 150 land deals myself, as an investor and an owner and a flipper and everything like that. So what, within the business broker piece, what do you think would be invaluable for someone that is starting out their career. Maybe they just finished college, or maybe they're at a lull where they can make a diagonal move or a vertical move, but they don't really like the company. They're interested in kind of getting into the more entrepreneurial space, but still want that paycheck of, what.
First of all, I think everybody ought to mind right there. Finance has always been my soft spot, and I've supplemented that over the years. But I've always felt like I would be a better professional had I had a better ability to read financial statements, to read balance sheets. To me, the devil is in the details. It's a lot harder for me to dig into financial details. So I would say, and I think a lot of the deception that occurs in our business comes about with an Excel spreadsheet that is so complicated that they're really just fudging to make the deal look great. I looked at one yesterday for a client that someone wants to buy his land and they want to keep him in the deal. And, at the end, you're going to get 3 times the value for your land if you stay in the deal. That almost never happens. I said, in 40, 50 years in the business, I almost never have met a guy. I don't think I've ever met a guy that said, this is great. I gave this guy my land. I subordinated my land and he developed it and he gave me 3 times the value of the land. I've never heard that story. I've never heard a happy ending. It's usually, oh my God, he took all my money and I lost my land, or I got 50% of what the land was worth. If somebody doesn't have the money to buy your land, whether you finance it or not, if they don't have the capital to buy your land, you probably shouldn't do business with them because they're using you to leverage. So I think the financial side is super, super important. I kind of went around your question, I think.
No, I mean, I think it's really, really useful advice where I feel like that's something that, I'll toot my own horn about is coming from the large corporate world into the land space gave me the ability to understand the dynamics of what investors are looking for, what, sellers or buyers or anything like that are looking for, where you can take a complex pro forma and boil it down to the actual, hey, this is what actually this means and everything like that. You don't need to do all this complexity with levered and unlevered IRR to blah, 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 all this kind of stuff. And, it's the knowledge of being able to do it that makes it really attractive for people that you're working with. This person knows what they're talking about.
Because after having said what I say, the wealthiest client I ever worked for had a net worth of $350 million. He owned an entire oil field. I gave him a sort of a complex pro forma. He wanted me to build him out of a project and build houses. And I gave him like a 20-page spreadsheet. And he said, Ken, can you go home and give me a 1-pager? He said, I'm not very smart. He had $350 million. I probably had $30,000. He looked at me and he said, can you just give it to me on 1 page? I'm not very smart. He just wanted me to boil it down to the essence. Mm-hmm. And I have found that the people I have worked for with the highest net worth always had a talent for simplifying a deal, not for doing the 50-page spreadsheets.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, there's so much decision fatigue whenever you're operating at a level like that, where it's just like, here are the 3 bullet points you need to know, yes or no.
Ken, one question I always like to ask people with a lot of experience, and especially being that you said you don't like buying land yourself anymore, what do you do to invest? Are you just putting your money into stocks? Are you buying, triple net commercial?
Put most of our funds into mutual funds. But we wouldn't put it into one. We'd spread it among about 10. And she and I would each have our own mutual funds. So we had a competition. So every year, at the end of the year, we'd have a meeting and we would go over our investment results and we would get rid of the losers. She'd do the research. So I have a really, really good wife who was great at investing. And I like, for the same reason, I always say buy a couple of pieces of property rather than one. We always found that having a very diverse set of mutual funds was good. So that's one pillar. Then I got really scared in the market. I bought some annuities. So one pillar, I'm just telling you about my own portfolio. There's one pillar that is mutual funds. There's one pillar that is annuities. And then I made a couple 5 or 10 years ago, I did a self-directed IRA when I found out that you could do your own real estate deals with your own IRA funds. I set up Blue Sky Development, and I used that. What happened is I did start doing deals again. I built like an 8-unit townhome. The 8-unit townhome project was amazing because it was on 1 acre of land, and I was able to wrestle about, I'm trying to think, 314. So I made about $40,000 on 8 townhomes. That was $320,000. And it took me 2 years to develop the land, build the townhomes, and sell them. And I thought, wow, if I just had 1 acre of land every year, I could make $160,000 a year just developing 1 acre of land for 8 townhomes. If I just did that over and over and over and over, that's a pretty good income stream. But I only did that with a certain proportion of my net worth. And I said, okay, going into this, I'm not going to risk more than 5 to 10% of my net worth because I don't want to be homeless and 80 years old. And so I started doing micro developments, what I call micro developments, which I think, if you think about it, small pieces of land are not attractive to national home builders. National home builder needs to have at least 60 to 80 units for them to even bother putting up a model and going through the motions. So anything less than 30, 40 units, when I went to buy those land parcels, I didn't have competition. Smaller home builders don't have the capital resources to do that. So then you can sell those lots to smaller home builders, which was the second deal that I did. I also have, out of that same mutual fund, I have equipment loans to people that I do like micro loans to people and get a return. And I always take 50%, like 150% collateral. So I had a buddy that wanted to open up a mowing and erosion control. I helped him buy the equipment. I get a good return. It's fun to invest in other people. And then, of course, I get Social Security. And then I have a very diverse income stream now from doing consulting, which is by the hour, and from doing brokerage, which is by the deal. And I'm very proud of this. I'm very proud of one thing. I came here 12 years ago, and I've had good business ever since then. I've never once advertised. I've never once done any marketing. Somehow the business just came to me. And I always felt like it would be a crime to turn down business that just falls in your lap, because for many years I had to fight to get business. And then of course you have Social Security. So I have about 6 or 7 different sources of income. So I don't feel bulletproof, but I feel pretty good. And that's by design. I would never want to make my net worth out of just land or just mutual funds. Mutual funds are slow and sleepy, but there were years when I had 20, 30% returns on mutual funds. So I think the key is, like anything else, the key is diversity. When I built the townhomes, I kept one and I rented out to a paralegal who does all my work. So, I'm a landlord. I'm not excited about being a landlord, but I noticed that I make a lot more money in appreciation. So I built that unit 4 or 5 years ago, and it was worth $390 when I built it. It's appreciated to $560. So the rent is immaterial. As long as it cash flows, I don't care. I'm going to keep it forever because I'm in a city that is becoming like Boulder. It's becoming more and more price aggressive. And so we've never lost. In the last 25 years, Fort Collins has only had 3 down years. One was -2, one was -3, one was -8. Every other year was a winner. So why wouldn't you keep property in a market like that?
Yeah, that's all fantastic advice and great diversification strategy. And a lot of it is so boring, which is exactly what you need to do to preserve your wealth, which is where you're at in life. And it sounds like with your business.
You're exactly right.
Overnight, that's 50 years.
I'm going to feel that. I love that. I'm a great success, 50 years in the making. I'm going to feel that.
There we go. But let's talk about some of the fun kind of passion stuff. You've got something going on with prairie dogs that I see. You've got this ladies and land community. Talk about what you're passionate about, the non-profit work that
You're very on the money. It's this, I don't know if you know Rodney,
you give back.
Rodney Hall, the headhunter. He and I are good friends. We always joke that nobody teaches this very well. And he's always encouraged me to do like a university of land. And it's been kind of a joke, but I did a fundraiser last year for the Bears Ears Partnership in southern Utah. It's a monument with a lot of cultural resources near. It's hard to explain, but they're a cultural and an environmental organization. And I took a bunch of donors down. We had a donor trip. We went down the raft for a couple of days and raised a lot of money because everybody was infected with the passion of the purpose. And so they called me this year and they said, Ken, let's do something again. Your last year's trip was great. We loved the people. It was very successful. And I said, I don't want to do a donor trip this year. I want to do a seminar. So I'm going to do a seminar in Moab, Utah on archaeological due diligence because nobody thinks about archaeological due diligence. I guarantee you 0 to 2% worry about archaeological due diligence. I've had several occasions. I've had deals that would have been huge losers if we hadn't done archaeological due diligence. So I'm going to do a one-day seminar on what's involved in archaeological due diligence. We're going to spend 2 days in the field. The first day, we're going to see obvious because there's 50,000 cultural sites in the Bears Ears National Monument. So the first day, we're going to go see things that hit you in the face, cliff dwellings, rock art, whatever. The second day, we're going to go to a different landscape that's got an equal amount of cultural resources, but you'd never know it. So the message is, this is land that is absolutely filthy rich with cultural resources. I've been in this area. You would never know it. So the key there is to identify that you can't just drive around and look at land and tell which one has got 10,000-year-old relics, artifacts, or whatever. There's a very simple and inexpensive way to lever that risk. So a little education, maybe a moderate amount of education, a lot of connectivity because we're going to bring together land guys and other real estate professionals, and we're going to hang out. Connectivity to me is a huge part of the business. And we're going to get out in the field because almost every land guy likes to hike, likes to get out and do things outdoors. So I figure we're going to connect on all those points. I'm going to use the facilities of the Bears Ears Partnership to do that. I'm going to borrow their archaeologists and perhaps some others. And all the funds that I raise, there's going to be a fee for this. All the funds go to the partnership. So I was talking to the director of the Southern Utah Wilderness Alliance last week about this. And he said, Ken, anytime you want to do that for us, he said, I can tell you right now, we're all in. So my spring seminar is going to be another seminar on a land topic. And all the proceeds from that, I'm going to put all the energy in. I'm going to put everything together. But anything that's over and above the cost goes to the nonprofit. So my nonprofits are all outdoor, wilderness related, protection of the environment related, culture related. I'm excited about that because it's a lot of fun, hits a lot of buttons. And everybody last year, they all said the same thing. Amazing group of people, amazing good time. They learned a lot. They were inspired. And, what could be better than that? You go out for 3 days and hang out with a bunch of land guys and you learn something and have a little fun. That's perfect.
That sounds awesome. And when you get your final job,
I bet I do.
REI finally, you'll be able to advertise for events like this. And
well, Ken, we're already a little bit over, so we'd like to move towards the close. So there's 2 questions we always finish with. The first of which, are there any questions that we should have asked?
You should have asked me how many times I've been married because the business eats up marriage.
How many?
And I think you both know that. You probably have felt that stress. Yeah. And so I guess the most important thing in your career is to marry the right person. I didn't start to build wealth until I married the right person.
I like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, and then sometimes it's funny where people will interview business partners more than they interview their potential spouse who's a life partner. And I think that's crucial.
Yeah. Okay, well, I appreciate that. That's a new one. We haven't heard that yet, but I think wise. Final question, Ken. Where can people find out more about you if they want to participate in the non?
I would say just follow me on
When you
LinkedIn
really
because as you probably noticed, there is, I tend to ramble all over the map on what we talk about. I'm doing an update on the archaeological due diligence is going to be October 17th through 19th in Moab. We're going to base in Moab because it's the only place that has decent hotel rooms. The places we're going to go to are going to be remote. So I would say just find me on LinkedIn. Once or twice a week, I'm on the phone with somebody I have absolutely never met, don't know anything about, but they'll send me a note on LinkedIn and say, hey, do you have half an hour to talk to me about something? And I take those calls. I feel like because I am the result of several dozen people who helped me in my career, that when I needed the answer to a question, they took time to painstakingly help me grow. And I'm fearful not to help others because I'm afraid I've had really good karma my whole life. I'm afraid not to help others because I'm afraid the karma is going to go away. So I always have time. I love hearing about other people's questions and their problems. And oftentimes I learn more from someone calling me for advice. I learn more from them than they learn from me. They just don't realize it. Just be prepared to have a grueling interrogation. Because if you have a problem, I don't feel like if you ask me, there's no boundaries. I got to know, where's your financial pinch point? Can you really afford to do this? So if you're willing to be honest with me, I'll give you the best advice. I'll slap you around. And I do it full well knowing that 50% of the advice I give people, they totally ignore.
Well, that's pretty cool. We really appreciate you coming on the show. This is a fun conversation. We'll have to do a follow-up at some point, but that's pretty cool. We really appreciate you coming on the show. This is a fun conversation. We'll have to do a follow-up at some point, but until next time, everybody, this is Dan Habercost and Mason McDonald with Ken Mitchell for the Big Picture Blueprint, signing off.